Some towns have stories they don't tell. Secrets buried beneath time, whispered only in the dark. Holloway looks normal on the surface, a quiet town, ordinary. But if you stay long enough, you start to notice things. People disappear here. Not with sirens, not with searches, just gone. And then there's the tape, a tape no one talks about, a tape that once watches you back. Eyela Marsh thought it was just another story. She was wrong. She sees you, and now, so do I.
There was something off about Holloway. It wasn't a ghost town, not in the traditional sense. People lived there, families, students, workers, but there was a weight in the air, something that settled on the skin like a layer of dust. The town had history, the kind no one liked to talk about. It clung to its past like a whisper lingering too long after the words had been spoken. The streets of Holloway were always quiet at night. No one stayed out past 11. Even the bars closed early. It wasn't a rule. It was just how things were. The town square had a clock tower that hadn't worked in years, stuck at 3:12 a.m., the exact time, as the old folks said, when the Holloway massacre had happened. Most newcomers dismissed the stories as local folklore, but those who stayed long enough noticed things. How streetlights flickered at the same time every night. How the air felt heavier around Holloway High School, particularly near the old library wing, closed off for renovations for over a decade. How, every now and then, someone just disappeared. It wasn't loud. No police sirens, no missing person posters plastered on every corner. Just a name, muttered in hushed tones. An empty seat at the diner, a mailbox overflowing with unread letters. And then, life went on. Eyela had only been in Holloway for 3 months, but she already felt like she'd been there too long. She was a journalist, a freelancer who had taken a job at the Holloway Gazette, mostly because it was the only paper willing to hire someone with her spotty resume. She had a habit of chasing the wrong stories, things that couldn't be explained, things people didn't want to hear. Her last job had ended badly. A story about a missing girl, a town that refused to talk, and an editor who quietly removed her article without explanation. Eyela didn't stop digging, and soon she was out of a job. Holloway felt like another dead-end town, another place where people whispered and refused to look her in the eye. But there was something here, something beneath the surface. Eyela could feel it, and she was going to find it. Nathan had lived in Holloway his entire life. He had seen enough reporters come and go, poking at things that should have been left alone. He was the town's historian, or at least that's what he called himself. In reality, he ran an old bookstore that no one visited anymore. The shelves were lined with books that hadn't been touched in years, their spines cracked, pages yellowed. Nathan didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in history, in the idea that people created their own ghosts by refusing to let go of the past. But even he had to admit, something was wrong with Holloway. Ollie was only 16, but he had seen more than most adults in Holloway. He worked part-time at the local movie theater, the Midnight Reel, where old horror films played on a loop. He didn't mind. He liked horror. It made sense to him. Real life was scarier. Ollie had a secret. He had seen something. Something he shouldn't have. Something inside the old library wing. And now, it was following him.
It started with a rumor. Eyela first heard about it from a waitress at the only decent diner in town. "There's a tape," the woman had whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Not a movie, not some bootleg horror thing. Something else. You watch it, and then She had trailed off, shaking her head. Eyela had laughed. And then what? But the woman didn't answer. Nathan had dismissed it outright. Urban legends. Every town has them. There was a story like that when I was a kid. Something about a woman who recorded herself speaking to the dead. It's just nonsense. But then there was Ollie. Ollie, who had been avoiding her, who looked exhausted, his eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. When she finally got him to talk, all he said was, "It's real." And then he handed her the tape. Eyela held the tape in her hands, feeling its weight. It was an old VHS, the kind no one used anymore, its label completely blank. "Where did you get this?" she asked Ollie. The boy shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the diner, glancing at the door like he expected someone to burst in at any moment. "The old library wing," he whispered. I didn't mean to take it. It was just there." Nathan, sitting across from them, sighed and rubbed his temples. "This is ridiculous. Eyela, do you really think some cursed tape is floating around in a forgotten part of a school?" Eyela ignored him, her gaze fixed on Ollie. "You watched it, didn't you?" Ollie swallowed hard. His hands trembled. "Yeah." A long pause. "What did you see?" Ollie exhaled shakily. "I don't remember all of it. It's like it wasn't just something I watched. It felt like something watching me. But there were flashes." He squeezed his eyes shut. A woman, standing in the dark, whispering. A house with all its doors open. A clock stuck at 3:12. And something crawling toward me. Not walking, crawling. His voice broke. "And now I keep seeing things." Nathan scoffed, but Eyela caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Seeing what?" she pressed. "Shadows moving in places they shouldn't. Faces in reflections that aren't mine. I hear things at night, whispering just outside my window." Eyela exchanged a look with Nathan. He wasn't laughing anymore. "Then watch it with me," she said. Ollie's eyes widened in horror. "No way. You don't understand. It's not just a tape. It's like an invitation. You watch it and it knows you. It finds you." "Who?" Eyela asked. Ollie just shook his head. "Not who," he whispered. "What?" Despite Ollie's protests, Eyela took the tape home. Her apartment was a small, cramped space above the Holloway Gazette office. It smelled like old coffee and printer ink, and the floor creaked no matter where she stepped. She sat in front of her TV, the VHS player she had borrowed from the newsroom hooked up to the screen. Nathan had agreed to come over. Not because he believed in any of this, but because, as he put it, "I'd rather watch you waste an evening than have to hear about it tomorrow." Ollie refused to come. "Just don't watch it," he had pleaded before leaving. But Eyela was a journalist, and journalists didn't walk away from a story. The tape clicked into place. The screen flickered. At first, static. Then, a dark room, flickering candlelight. A woman stood in the center, her back turned to the camera. Her black dress clung to her too thin frame, her hair matted and hanging over her shoulders. She was whispering something too low to understand. Then, a sudden cut. A house, abandoned, doors hanging open. A long, empty hallway. Another cut. A clock. 3:12 a.m. A whisper growing louder. Then, a shape. Crawling, dark, twisting limbs, a mouth that opened too wide. The screen went black. The TV hissed with static. Eyela's breath was caught in her throat. She turned to Nathan, but he sat stiffly, eyes locked on the screen. Then the TV shut off. Silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan cleared his throat, trying and failing to sound casual. Well, that was unsettling. Eyela exhaled. Her hands were clammy. It felt wrong, she admitted. Like it was looking at me. Nathan forced a chuckle. You're letting the kid's paranoia get to you. But as he reached for his drink, his fingers trembled. Eyela swallowed. She didn't want to admit it. But something in the room had changed. The air felt heavier, and somewhere, just barely audible, she thought she heard it. A whisper. Eyela didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the whisper from the tape echoing in her mind. 3:12 a.m. She glanced at her clock. 3:11. The room felt different. The shadows stretched in ways they shouldn't. The air was thick, charged. Then, the creak of a floorboard. Her stomach twisted. Another creak, closer. Her breath hitched. Then, she saw it. A shape in the corner of the room, low to the ground. Something moving, crawling. Her throat clenched shut. She wanted to move, to reach for her phone, but her body was frozen in place. The figure shifted, its limbs unnatural, its movements jerky, wrong. A wet, rasping breath filled the silence. Then it lifted its head. Eyes, hollow, sunken, mouth open in a silent scream. Then it lunged. Eyela shot up, gasping, heart slamming against her ribs. Her room was empty. The clock now read 3:13 a.m. It was gone. The next day, Eyela found Nathan sitting in his bookstore, staring blankly at the table. His hands were clasped, fingers gripping his knuckles tightly. "You saw something," she said. Nathan flinched. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something she never thought she'd see in his eyes. Fear. "I didn't sleep," he murmured. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it." "The thing from the tape?" Eyela asked. Nathan swallowed. "Number not just from the tape. It was here, Eyela. In my apartment." A long silence stretched between them. Then Eyela took a deep breath. "We need to know what this is," she said. "We need to find out where this tape came from." Nathan hesitated, but then slowly, he nodded. "Before it finds us first." They returned to the place where Ollie had found the tape, the abandoned wing of the Holloway library. The air inside was damp, the scent of rotting paper thick. Dust swirled in the shafts of light that cut through the boarded-up windows. As they searched the shelves, Eyela noticed something odd. A book, resting alone on an otherwise empty shelf. Its title, The Woman in the Dark. She picked it up. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. As she flipped through it, she felt a chill crawl up her spine. A name, repeated over and over. Eleanor Ward. A whisper echoed through the empty library. Eyela turned. Nathan stood frozen, staring at the far end of the room. And then she saw it, a shadow, moving on its own, coming toward them, crawling. Eyela couldn't move. The shadow slithered toward them, stretching unnaturally across the wooden floor. The air around them turned heavy, thick, suffocating. Nathan reached out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was ice cold. "Eyela," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We need to go, now." She didn't argue. They turned and ran. Their footsteps echoed through the abandoned library wing, the floor creaking beneath them as they darted past crumbling shelves. The whispering grew louder, swirling in the air like voices just out of reach. Then, the door slammed shut before they could reach it. Nathan yanked at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Eyela turned back. The shadow had stopped moving, but now it was growing, stretching, taking shape. A figure, tall, thin, wrong, its arms too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then the whispering stopped, and in the silence, a voice, low, rasping.
She sees you.
The lights flickered, then suddenly the room plunged into darkness. The moment the power returned, the shadow was gone. The library door, now unlocked, creaked open. Nathan and Eyela didn't speak as they stumbled out into the night, gasping for air. It wasn't just a ghost story, something was real, and it was following them. "Who the hell is Eleanor Ward?" Nathan finally asked, his voice hoarse. Eyela clutched the book against her chest, her mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to find out." That night she spent hours digging through old records, and then, buried deep in the town's archives, she found her. Eleanor Ward, a woman who had lived in Holloway nearly 60 years ago, a woman who had been accused of witchcraft, a woman who had vanished without a trace, and the last known photograph of her, a grainy black and white image, a woman in a long black dress, her head tilted, her face half hidden by dark matted hair. Eyela's stomach turned. She had seen that face before, on the tape. Eyela met Nathan the next morning at his bookstore, spreading out the old documents across the counter. "This isn't just a ghost story," she said. "Eleanor Ward disappeared in 1962, but there were rumors. People claimed she practiced witchcraft, that she cursed anyone who wronged her." Nathan frowned, skimming the records. "But what does that have to do with the tape?" Eyela hesitated, and then she pointed to a police report. It was dated October 31st, 1962. The night Eleanor Ward vanished, there had been a fire. A house, her house, burned to the ground. Inside, authorities found a collection of old film reels. Each one contained disturbing, unnatural imagery, just like the tape. "They said she experimented with something," Eyela whispered. "Something beyond this world, that she tried to trap herself in the film, to escape death." Nathan swallowed hard. "And now anyone who watches it invites her back." A heavy silence fell between them. Then, the lights flickered. A whisper crawled through the air. "You see me now." That night, Eyela felt the change before she even stepped inside her apartment. The air was colder. Her reflection in the window seemed wrong. Her own eyes stared back at her, but there was something behind them. Something watching. She closed the door and locked it, pressing her back against the wood. Then, the TV turned on by itself. Static. Then, a dark room. Flickering candlelight. The woman in the black dress. Only this time she wasn't standing still. She was moving, turning, facing the camera, facing Eyela. A whisper crawling through the air.
"Let me in."
The screen flickered, and then the TV shut off. Silence. Eyela's breath was ragged. She forced herself to move, to grab her phone. She dialed Nathan. It rang. And then she heard it. Not from the phone, but from the corner of her room. A ringtone. Nathan's ringtone, coming from the darkness. She turned, her pulse hammering. And then, a shape crawling toward her. The last thing she heard before everything went black was her own breath, shaking, breaking, and the whisper right beside her ear.
"You watched. Now you belong to me."
Eyela woke up on the floor. The room was silent. Her body ached as she pushed herself up, heart hammering. The apartment felt wrong, cold, still. She reached for her phone, 3:33 a.m. The screen was cracked, no missed calls, no messages. But something had been here. She knew it. Then, a whisper right behind her.
You're running out of time.
She spun around. No one. But in the dim light, she saw something new, her reflection, standing in the mirror, not moving, not matching her, staring back, eyes hollow. And then it smiled, a slow, unnatural grin. The glass shattered. Nathan didn't pick up. She ran. Through the empty streets, breath coming in ragged gasps. The whole world felt muted, off, like she had stepped into a place that didn't belong to reality anymore. She reached the bookstore, banging on the door. "Nathan, open up!" Silence. Then, the lock clicked. She pushed inside. The place was dark, shelves casting long, eerie shadows. The smell of dust and old paper clung to the air. And then, she saw him, Nathan, standing in the middle of the room, back turned, not moving. Her stomach twisted. Something was wrong. "Are you okay?" Her voice was barely a whisper. No answer. She stepped closer. And then, she saw the tape, sitting on the counter. The TV was on. Static crackled, the screen flickered. A dark room. A figure. And then, Nathan moved. But not like himself. Like something else was inside him. His head twisted at an unnatural angle. His breathing was slow, labored. And when he finally turned, it wasn't Nathan anymore. His eyes were pitch black, and his lips parted into a whisper that wasn't his voice.
She's already here.
The lights cut out. Eyela ran, through the shelves, up the stairs, into Nathan's back office. She slammed the door shut, locking it. Her breath came in rapid gasps. Think. The tape, the curse, the woman. She had to end it. Her eyes darted to the desk. Papers, books, the old files. She grabbed them, flipping through page after page. Eleanor Ward, witchcraft, cursed film reels, and then one sentence stood out. She was burned, but not destroyed. Fire. That was it. She had to burn the tape. She shoved the door open, sprinting downstairs. Nathan, or whatever was inside Nathan, stood still in the shadows, head tilted, watching her. She grabbed the tape, heart racing. Then, the TV flickered. The screen changed. A well, deep, empty. The camera tilted up. And then, she was there. Eleanor, crawling toward the screen, long black hair hanging over her face, fingers twitching, coming closer, coming through. Eyela grabbed a lighter, hands shaking, flicked it on. "Burn, you bitch," she whispered. She dropped the flame. The tape caught fire. And the screaming started. Not from Eyela, not from Nathan, but from the TV. A sound like tearing, screeching, something being ripped from existence. The screen shattered. Sparks flew. Nathan collapsed, and the shadow, the figure, Eleanor, began to burn. Her body twisted, writhing. She turned, face finally visible, eyes sunken, skin cracked, mouth open in a scream of pure hatred. Then, she was gone. The fire went out. The TV was dead. The tape, nothing but ashes. And for the first time in days, silence. Nathan woke up a few hours later, groggy. Eyela didn't explain everything, just that it was over. They buried the ashes of the tape, tossed the TV, left the bookstore and never spoke of it again. But Eyela knew, somewhere out there, another tape might still exist, waiting for someone else to press play. And when they did, Eleanor Ward would crawl back into the world once more. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, make sure to give this video a like and share it with others who love a good scare. And don't forget to subscribe to the Midnight Broadcast for more terrifying stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay safe and beware of the shadows.